Hi everyone! Welcome back to Talks in Class, my little weekly time machine. Thank you so much for tuning in, for joining me today. I'm Jenna, by the way, if you're new and you don't know that already. Happy to have you here. I feel like this week just flew by, and I guess technically it was a shorter week. We had the New Year holiday last week, which somehow feels like it was ages ago already, but I'm definitely feeling like I'm back in the swing of things. I'm back in a little bit more of a routine, at least, and I'm recovering from the holidays, at least kind of. I'm making baby steps towards moving out of that holiday mode. I actually ate some vegetables this week. I drank water. I exercised. So, I'm getting there. And I'm trying to make a point to leave the apartment at least once a day. And this feels really sad because just the bar is so low that truly my goal is just, eat a vegetable, drink water, leave the house instead of just eating cookies and, sitting around in pajamas all day long like many of us do during the holidays. Working from home, I feel like can really get to you, especially in the winter when it's dark and it's colder. And I feel like people are just less social in general. So it is a little bit more, or it requires a little bit more effort to go out and do things. So this past Sunday, I was feeling a little cabin fever because we had a pretty low-key weekend. So my husband and I went to see that movie, Anyone But You, I think. Yeah, Anyone But You, I think it's called. Honestly, I had no idea what it even was really, except for that it was some sort of comedy and Sydney Sweeney was in it. I don't even think I ever saw a trailer for it, but I also knew that it was a short movie. Every movie now is like 3.5 hours long, which sometimes I can get behind that, but for the most part, we need to go back to a good 90-minute movie. And this checked all the boxes, you guys. I was so pleasantly surprised by this movie. It is a good old classic rom-com, hour and a half-ish, not super long, cheesy in all the right ways, classic kind of cliches. And it reminded me actually that I've been wanting to do an episode all about the rom-coms of the 90s and the early 2000s because there were just so many great rom-coms of that time. It could be a really fun conversation. So probably look out for that episode sometime in the near future. As always, before we get into this conversation this week, I will start with my what good happened. As some of you know, or may know, I used to work in fitness. That was my career before social media. I was a lot of things. I was a fitness instructor, and then I started managing studios, and I had my own in-home training business for a while. So I was all over the place in the fitness industry. But during the second half of the 2010s especially, I spent pretty much all my time in boutique fitness studios in New York City. And that was such an era, the boutique fitness boom of the 2010s. Like, I feel like boutique fitness studios were just so trendy, and I was just really immersed in that whole thing. And I did love studios. They have a great community aspect to them that's really different from other workout formats, like a regular gym. Anyway, this past weekend, I was invited to this little event sort of thing at a fitness studio. And I don't think I've taken a proper fitness studio class in well over a year. And it was just so fun to be in a studio again. I absolutely died in the workout because I just haven't been doing things like that. But it is a workout that I typically enjoy doing, which is something that I prioritize. I like to do workouts that I don't hate. And it was just really nice to be around a group of people in an environment like that again. Speaking of big groups of people and the energy that being in a group of people brings to an environment or an event, this week's episode is actually about one experience that I think still really relies on a group of people coming together to enjoy an in-person event together, even now in the age of everything happening virtually. Although a lot of things about this experience have changed from the time I was a kid until now, and that is going to concerts. With everything that's changed since millennials and Gen Xers were kids, notably so many things moving from some sort of in real life format to a virtual or digital format, or just moving from a physical medium to some sort of digital format, but also moving from local to global, thanks to technology and the internet and social media and all these things. Especially when we're talking about entertainment, so much has changed about the way we interact with entertainment and find out about entertainment. And I talk about this a lot because now that I'm in my mid-30s, almost late 30s, if we're being honest, it's becoming really clear to me that this is a defining difference between kind of like then versus now, like my childhood versus the world that I'm experiencing now as an adult. And it's something that I really feel has made this huge change throughout my lifetime. But even with everything that has changed, there is one thing that I think has stayed very central to entertainment and pop culture that still happens for the most part in real life, and that is concerts. Of course, this past summer, Taylor Swift released her Eras Tour as a movie, and there are other examples of concerts that have moved to some sort of virtual or digital format. But I think in general, the attitude towards concerts still is that they're very much an in real life, in-person, live experience. You can't really experience the full intended experience of a concert without being there in person. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? It's live music. You should experience it live. And we've really accepted not getting that full in real life experience in a lot of other contexts. I mean, things that we probably never would have thought we would see in our lifetime, like meetings or school or happy hours during the pandemic. I don't ever really want to be reminded of the virtual happy hour time period, actually, but we've accepted some of these things moving away from being in real life. So maybe in the future we will get to the point where people don't need to go to a concert in real life anymore. But I feel like the pandemic kind of had dual impacts in that regard, in that they showed us that a lot of things could be done remotely or virtually, but they also showed us that we don't necessarily want to do a lot of those things virtually. Like, I don't ever want to drink wine on Zoom with my friends, ever. That's just not fun for me. I want to be with them in the room as we drink the wine. I mean, it's just not the same thing, right? And call me old, but I feel the same way about a concert. And I'm really happy that, you know, we have found ways to do things remotely to make people's lives easier. But I'm also happy that we have some of these things that we're still hanging on to, you know, some of these things that we still feel are important to do in person, in real life, with other people there along with you, experiencing the same thing at the same time in this big group and having that energy. And I feel like it really does change the dynamic. But just because we haven't moved concerts entirely to some sort of virtual online experience does not mean that the experience is necessarily the same as it used to be, because back in the dark ages, and by that I mean the 1990s, it was quite different. First of all, we had to hear about the concert in the first place. Now, of course, we hear about things instantaneously. I mean, truly instantaneously. If a big artist we love announces that they are going on tour, I mean, the whole world knows within minutes, maybe even seconds. If you're a fan of a certain artist, you know, maybe one of your friends will see the social media posts and then they'll send it to you, or they'll text you right away to let you know. So even if you're not physically looking at your phone in that minute, it is likely that you will find out within minutes, I mean, hours at the very least. All that is to say that the internet experience that we have now allows word to travel very, very quickly. But back in the 90s, that was not the case, obviously. We had dial-up internet and no social media. So unless you saw some band you like announce their tour via an article on your AOL home screen, or maybe you had a friend with some sort of insider information who happened to send you the information via email, which you would access after 90 seconds or so of that static, screechy noise that your computer would make as it literally dialed up the good old World Wide Web, it was unlikely that you were going to find out about a concert online. I mean, that just wasn't how we would seek information for the most part. Most likely, you would find out about this via some sort of ancient 90s technology like the radio. And I don't mean streaming radio, like literally radio on the dial that you would probably be listening to either on your big boom box in your room or in your parents' car as they were driving you to school or soccer practice or maybe the mall if you were lucky. Before MTV became, my entire identity in the center of my little tween universe, the radio was really pretty much the only source, definitely the main source of any sort of entertainment related news, but especially music related news, obviously, considering it was the radio. And I grew up in a super small town, which you guys already know probably if you listen to this podcast. So the radio station that we listened to was out of the closest sort of city to us, which was about a half an hour away. And that city was also not large. It was a college town, but pretty small. And there was a small venue there that would occasionally get some concerts, but most likely any concerts that we would really want to see, definitely any really large name group or band, would be in either Minneapolis or Chicago, which were hours away. Minneapolis is about 2.5 hours away. Chicago is over 4 hours away. But still, because that's where we had to go, the local radio station would announce these concerts even though they were far away. And I don't know if this is a Midwestern thing specifically or a small town thing or a small town Midwestern thing. I don't know, but people in my hometown, they're not afraid to drive. A long distance, no big deal. If they want to go do something, we were always driving hours away for something. But I guess if you have no choice because everything is far away, that just is what it is. And other than the radio station, there were other, primitive, ancient forms of technology or advertising where we could find out about events like concerts, like the newspaper. My mom still buys the newspaper and she sits at the dining room table and reads it. And it's so quaint to think about that now, but it's crazy to think that in my lifetime, we relied on the newspaper for everything. Even into my teen years, that's where I went to find out information. We'd look at the newspaper for movie times. We would look at it to look for job openings, like a little part-time job, or to find out what was going on near us, if there was an event or who was having a sale or, whatever. It was all in the newspaper. It was like a news feed, except on paper, hence newspaper. Or maybe you would even see it on a billboard if it was a really big artist with a big marketing budget, or you could see a flyer hung up in the music store. That was a pretty common one, especially if you had a cool local record store. I usually bought my CDs at Best Buy or Target. Not really that cool, but we did have a record store in that town where we would go to the mall or the movies or whatever. And once I got to high school, my friends and I would drive down to that record store pretty often, mostly because it was where everybody went to buy certain recreational items that they sold, accessories, if you will, that were used to do certain recreational activities, along with stuff like incense, which we used to cover up the smell of said recreation. But it was a cool record store, and if you had a cool record store that had one of those areas inside where people would post up events and local stuff and concerts, you'd probably see flyers there for concerts, especially smaller local shows that might not be advertised on the radio and definitely not plastered on a billboard. I was too young in the 90s to be on the lookout for cool underground lesser known bands or small shows or anything like that. I was a kid and a tween, and as such, I was interested in what so many of us little tween girls were interested back in the 90s, which was mostly boy bands and pop stars. These acts were obviously very commercially popular, so you would absolutely hear about these concerts on the radio, and even MTV. They'd maybe announce that so-and-so was going on tour, so you'd at least know about the tour. But then it was up to you to figure out the closest tour stop to you, the closest location, when it was, and how you could buy your tickets, which you'd find out from the more local forms of media. The newspaper, the radio, the local news, whatever. That was the easy part, okay? You found out about the concert, but then you had to get your tickets. And these are the things that always make me realize how truly different things are now, how simple really it is to pretty much find anything that you want, do anything that you want. But of course, in the 90s, you couldn't just go online and buy your concert ticket from your phone with the click of a button or from your little laptop. Or maybe you could buy them online. I actually have no idea. But if it was possible, it certainly wasn't common for the everyday person. We had to go out and buy them in person. And the experience of buying concert tickets back then for a super anticipated show or like a really popular band was much like the experience of Black Friday shopping was back then. It was a race, a marathon, if you will. People would set up chairs, they'd camp out, they'd hold their pee longer than you thought humanly possible, just in hopes of being first in line, or at least early enough in line to get really good seats to this concert. It was kind of a rite of passage, an experience that bonded us all together. If at some point in your life you have not camped outside of a music venue or a Walmart or a Best Buy all night long in order to get front row concert tickets or a TV for 90% off for a new PlayStation or whatever, or stood outside of a Coach House Gifts before the mall opened in the morning in hopes to get that Princess Diana Beanie Baby during a private Beanie Baby sale, you just haven't lived, okay? You just haven't lived. So we had to buy the tickets, and there were obviously a variety of places that you could go do this. The most logical place would be the music venue. You could buy them at the box office, but of course, if you lived super far away, like me, you couldn't go there and buy the tickets. At least it wasn't very practical to do that. So for us country folk, we had the customer service counter at places like the grocery store or JCPenney, or my personal favorite, which was Macy's. That was always our location of choice, was the customer service counter at Macy's in the Valley View Mall, which I don't know, actually, in those days, it might have still been Marshall Fields. The customer service counter always felt sort of like a special place to me because it was where you could go for basically anything that you needed. You need to pay your Macy's credit card bill? Go write a personal check at the Macy's customer service counter and hand it to the lady. Or if you need a set of candle holders gift wrapped, or have your cousin's wedding registry printed out on physical paper, customer service counter. If you need to pick up the curtains that you ordered by calling the 1-800 number in the catalog, you guessed it, customer service counter. I'm sure you could also go there if you were mad about something and needed to talk to the manager, or if you wanted to return something, or if you wanted to apply for a job there maybe. I don't know. You could go there for everything. So it made sense that this one-stop shop that was the customer service counter would also sell concert tickets for events that were taking place, 2 hours away in a completely different state. At least in my 8-year-old mind it did, because this is where we went for everything. So if you don't remember, or maybe you weren't alive then, that's okay. They would sell these tickets remotely, I guess you could call it, because they had a big old computer back there at the customer service counter that was connected to Ticketmaster. So it was like going to Ticketmaster in person to buy your tickets, basically. So you would wait in the line, and then you'd get up to the customer service counter, and you would tell the nice lady who had been standing there all day in her black heels and her little pencil skirt and her blazer, selling people Celine Dion tickets and wrapping picture frames for wedding gifts. You would tell her what tickets you were looking for. And she'd click, clack, click, 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 clack, clack, clack on the keyboard to see which seats were available for the concert that you were looking to buy tickets for. And then they'd whip out this paper map of the venue to show you which sections and which seats were still available, just like you now see online. And this never happened to me personally because I was too young to experience this truly in the 90s, but I've heard so many stories from people who waited hours in line for concert tickets outside of the venue, or, a Sam Goody or wherever else you could buy them, as soon as they went on sale, trying to be first in line so that they could get front row tickets. Concert tickets then also weren't like $1 million. So it was actually feasible for a normal person to just buy first row concert tickets without selling like an organ or their house. So they'd wait for hours and hours and hours in hopes of getting those front row tickets, only to get to the front of the line finally and find out that the entire 20 first rows or whatever were blocked off for something. The label blocked them off to put media there or something like that. Or if you were buying at a record store and not the actual venue, and someone who bought at another location got the seats that you wanted before you did. The same thing happens now, of course, except for this all happens from everybody's individual computers from the comfort of their own homes, on their phone or their laptop or whatever. And then once you chose your seats and you paid the nice customer service counter lady, probably with cash or maybe even a check because it was the 90s, she would give you the physical tickets, like the actual paper tickets, which were the only evidence that you had of the purchase. There was no emailed receipt. I mean, it was just these paper tickets that you would have to take home with you and then put them somewhere really freaking safe so you didn't lose them before the concert, which was usually weeks away because you were purchasing them in advance. And I don't know what this says about my level of personal responsibility or just ability to function as a basic adult, but that seems so reckless to me now. Like the fact that there was no digital copy of the ticket and you just had to hold on to this physical thing. Even more reckless was buying the tickets by mail order or phone, which worked basically just like a catalog order, like how you'd order from the JCPenney catalog or the Delia's catalog or any other catalog order. You'd call an 800 number and you'd give them your credit card number over the phone, or you'd fill out a paper form, write a check, and then mail it off for your tickets, and then they would mail the tickets to you, like in the mail, and they would go in your mailbox. This is also how we bought tickets for things like Disney World. Or we'd call the travel agent, another ancient concept from like a long forgotten time, and she would mail us the Disney passes. Honestly, she probably mailed us the plane tickets too, just in the mail. Hopefully they don't get lost because those are your only tickets. But all of this was really exciting, and I think all of this build up and all of this having to go in person really had to do with that excitement, like the effort that we put in. Not that it's not effort to get concert tickets now, it definitely is. It's like going into battle, but the activity that went into it. We would have to spread the information through, various formats of technology and advertisement and word of mouth, sometimes having to call different places that sold the tickets to find out exactly the time that the tickets were going on sale, the lining up, the waiting with other people. You were, building camaraderie with these people that were hoping to go to the same show. It just built a lot of anticipation and excitement that I don't feel like we have now. And just the fact that this was a relatively accessible thing to do. It's so unlike now. It's almost absurd how expensive concert tickets are. You almost just can't do it. It's insane. And I think because I lived in a pretty rural area, concerts weren't as big of a part of my youth as they probably were for other people my age who just had easier access because of geography to concerts. But I did see a couple of very memorable ones in my day. My first concert is actually so funny. This was the 90s, and I feel like so many people saw really cool bands as their first concert. Like my husband's first concert was Alanis Morissette. That's so cool. I would love to go see Alanis Morissette, but not me. My first concert was All for One in 1995. I was 8. And even though I don't think that it's necessarily the coolest option I could have found in 1995, at the age of 8, this was pretty much the coolest thing that I could think of. Now when I think of All for One, all I think of is Ryan Reynolds in a fat suit singing I Swear in Just Friends, which is honestly amazing. But in 1995, I was obsessed with this song. It was all over the radio. It was everywhere. It was a super popular song. And that's really the entire reason my little friends and I wanted to go to this concert, was because we loved this song. I had the cassette tape, and my poor mother probably had to endure that song literally on a loop for months probably. So we went to the concert. I went with my mom and her friends and their 3 daughters, the same ones that I spent New Year's 1999 with, which I just talked about in the Y2K episode. And I remember that we went in their family's van. They had one of those very 90s giant vans with the TV in the back and like actual curtains on the windows. I legitimately remember thinking that van was so amazing. Like a TV in the back of your van in 1995. I mean, luxury. So anyway, we piled into the van. We went to the All for One concert. I wore a navy blue outfit with sunflowers on it because 1995. And I felt extremely cool going back to 3rd grade and announcing to all my little friends that I had seen All For One in concert. Yes, the same one who we heard on the Top 5 at 8 on the radio station every single night. And you guys already know this because I have talked about it a million times, but the first concert we really traveled to see was the Backstreet Boys Millennium Tour in 1999. We had to go to Minneapolis, and I'm sure we stayed in a hotel overnight because it was at night, and we went with the same friends and their parents, and I also brought my best friend from school, and it was such a big deal, you guys. One of my favorite things about that concert was that Mandy Moore opened for them on that tour, and nobody knew who she was yet. I mean, this was like bursting onto the scene, Mandy Moore. And afterward, when we went home, we went out and found the CD single for Candy. Remember back in the 90s when you could buy just like a single of a song on a CD, and it was like $3. And we were the first ones to really know about that song before it blew up, and I was a little hipster about it. 6th grade, just so on the forefront of the music trends of MTV pop music. And then, of course, I saw Britney Spears' Onyx Hotel Tour in 2004, which I have also talked about before, which was in Chicago, so that was really a trek. In addition to those big name acts with major tours, there were other types of concerts that were pretty popular for kids in my area especially. First, of course, there were the festival type tours, things like Warped Tour. Of course, growing up in rural Wisconsin, Country Fest was a huge one, and this was wildly popular amongst my friends. I never went because the idea of sleeping in a camper in the summer heat while drinking outside nonstop for 3 hot summer days just never sounded particularly appealing to me, even when I was young and had energy for that kind of thing. But I looked forward to Country Fest weekend every year because I knew that everybody was going to come back with some great stories because so many people would go. I also had some friends who got really into like Bonnaroo and those types of festivals, especially later in high school and right after high school, so mid to late 2000s-ish. And I have to admit, I was never a big festival girl, mostly just because of the sanitary conditions and just like the general outside campingness of it all. I like my bed, I like a shower. It just wasn't for me. But I think that those types of concerts were really appealing for people in my area because they were more than just a couple of hours for an event. You know, since we lived in the middle of nowhere, if you have to drive 2, 3, 4 hours or more to go to a concert, it makes a little bit more sense if you're going to a weekend-long event rather than just a 3-hour show. It makes it more worthwhile. And then, of course, there was the quintessential late 90s, early 2000s concert experience, the Dave Matthews Band concerts. I don't know what it was about Dave Matthews, but especially just Dave's shows. These had teenagers just absolutely in a chokehold for some reason. I mean, everybody went to these. I don't know, even if you didn't even particularly like Dave Matthews, it did not matter. Everybody I know went to at least one Dave show in high school or shortly thereafter. I can't imagine that there were that many super fans of the music, but whatever, it didn't matter. We all went. It was the experience of going to the show that was fun. They were always at these big outdoor venues. In Wisconsin, they were at the Alpine Valley Amphitheater, which is an outdoor amphitheater with this huge lawn. And the shows were pretty cheap. So you'd pile all your friends into someone's, Ford Explorer or whatever, and you'd go to the show, and it was just a big party all day with all of your friends. And that's why we went, if we're being honest. It was just the experience of being there with your friends for the most part. And of course, there were people that were there for the music, but these were just another way to pass the time, to keep us occupied before the days of having a little personal computer in our pockets at all time to keep us lonely and entertained at the same time. The outdoor concerts, I don't know, I always felt like the outdoor concerts were the most fun. In my tiny town, we also had like little local outdoor music events were always super fun, and these were held at this small place right on the Mississippi River that has a big outdoor lawn and then this like little stage. And each spring they have this event called Reggae Fest, and it always kind of signaled the end of winter and the beginning of spring for us. And everyone in town would go. All my friends and I would go, and it was always so fun. But they would also have other bands play there back in the 2000s. I remember once they had Blue Oyster Cult, and all my friends and I were so excited to go. I think this was in 2006. I got so drunk at my friend's house when we were pre-gaming that I never made it to the actual concert. Oops. But no matter what kind of concert it was, where it was, what venue, what the band was, my friends and I always had so much fun. And I think it's safe to say that I probably have a lot more stuff from my childhood than a lot of people. So I do have some stuff from concerts that I went to. I have a couple pictures from before the concert, getting ready, or our outfits or whatever. I have a newspaper, the Minneapolis newspaper, clipping about the Backstreet Boys tour in 1999. I have a t-shirt from the Britney Spears Onyx Hotel tour. But that's really it. You know, I don't remember a lot of specifics about the shows themselves because before smartphones, we didn't capture every moment of our lives in a picture or a video. We just lived it. We did not watch a concert through a camera lens taking a video the whole time. I mean, it would be pretty impractical to even bring a camera into a venue, let alone like a video camera. You'd have to bring actual film cameras along with you in order to take pictures. I'm not even sure if that was allowed, but it was inconvenient, at least. And I'm pretty positive that video cameras were not allowed because, again, pre-smartphones, we would have had to take a separate device to record video, like a big old video camera. That wasn't happening. We just took our little paper ticket that we got from the nice lady at the Macy's customer service counter, some cash, maybe a lip gloss, and our little 2000s flip phone, which we had turned completely off anyway because we were going to a concert. So why would we need a phone? Nobody was calling us during a concert. And we went to the concert. We relived the memories of the concert by talking about it with our friends or talking to the friends that we went to the concert with, or maybe telling our other friends about it who weren't there. We'd maybe see a couple clips from a tour from a big artist on MTV or something like that, but really you didn't see footage from shows. You didn't know what you were getting until you actually got to the concert. And when we were there, we weren't worried about documenting it. I mean, we weren't really worried about anything. We were just worried about being there, watching it, experiencing it, having a good time. And I think that's the biggest change in terms of actually going to a concert now. I mean, again, call me old, but when I'm at a concert and all I see are phones in the air recording every moment of the show, it's kind of annoying. I don't know. I'm sorry. But also, while we're at it, no one is watching the 37 minutes worth of concert footage that you're putting on your Snap story. So just stop. Just watch the concert. Just enjoy it. And speaking of enjoying it, or not enjoying it, I guess, I'm going to leave you with a list. And because I didn't attend many big concerts growing up, I'm going to give you the top 5 concerts I wished I went to growing up in the 90s and 2000s. Number 5 is No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom tour in 1997. I was 10 in 1997, so I definitely wasn't going to a No Doubt concert, but I was obsessed with Tragic Kingdom. I think it stems from Just a Girl being on the Clueless soundtrack and in the movie Clueless, because I love that movie so much, because from then on, I had an obsession with No Doubt in general, but I had the Tragic Kingdom poster on my wall. I was obsessed with Gwen's entire aesthetic. I thought she was so cool. I was just a touch too young to have experienced that 90s. I got the late 90s, early 2000s, but that cool mid 90s always represents the older people, like the babysitters, the older sisters, the cool older kids that I saw wearing those fashions at the time. And this album and this tour captures that whole time period and like that vibe in my mind to this day. So wish I would have been able to experience that. Number 4, the Spice World tour in 1998, obviously the Spice Girls. I actually can't believe that I've never seen the Spice Girls. It's on my bucket list for them to go on tour so that I can see them. So Spice Girls, if somebody could just get the message out to them. In order to complete my bucket list, I'm going to need you to reunite and go on tour, because that is something that my little late 90s tween heart needs so badly. I was obsessed with the Spice Girls just like every other kid in the world probably at that time, but like almost to an unhealthy level. Although I think we probably were all in the same boat. I would have melted into a puddle had I seen them live as a kid, especially in 1998. I mean, that was like peak Spice Girls popularity. I cried when the Spice Girls broke up. I'm still a little broken up about it. Number 3, really switching gears here, the Nellyville tour from 2002. Chingy opened on this tour. Chingy and Nelly, you guys, if you know me, you know that I love 2 things. I love Nelly and I love Chingy. Fun fact, the first ever TikTok throwback video that I made that went viral, that started it all, the song on it was Right There by Chingy. That is the song that came to my mind when I made that video, because that's the song that represents the early 2000s to me. But Nelly will always hold a special place in my heart. When I was home recently, I found not 1 but 2 copies of the Nellyville album that I, for some reason, own, and I still know every single word to that CD. So I am forever disappointed that I missed this just epic tour. Number 2, the Britney Spears Oops, I Did It Again tour from the year 2000, you guys. This was peak Britney in my mind. People can argue all day about like best Britney albums, best Britney eras, and I think that there is a fair argument to be made for all of them. But to me, in my personal experience, in my mind, Oops, I Did It Again, Britney is just peak Britney. She was everything to me at this time. In the year 2000, I was in 7th and 8th grade. Okay, so like peak age to be obsessed with a pop star. I had the Oops, I Did It Again poster on my wall. I wanted that curtain, that beaded curtain from the cover hanging in my doorway so badly. I knew every single word to this album. I still do. I am so happy that I at least got to see Britney in concert at some point, but I wish I would have seen this concert because it's peak Britney in my mind. And number 1, some of you may have forgotten about this, but number 1 is the TRL tour from 2001. You guys, this was a multi-artist tour, huge tour that MTV put together called the TRL tour. Let me just read you the lineup of artists that were on this tour. 3LW, Dream, Jessica Simpson, she wasn't part of the original tour, but she joined later. City High also joined later. Eve, Nelly and the Saint Lunatics, and Destiny's Child. Imagine in 2001 going to see that lineup of artists. I would have simply passed away. In 2001, I think I was 15 years old. I was 14 years old. So this probably was not in the cards for me. Obviously, I didn't go, but it was a huge tour. They hit a bunch of different cities. I think they were in Minneapolis, which would have been the closest one to me. And the cool thing about this was that it was a one-time event. Obviously, these artists were not going to come together again to go on this tour. So it was like either you saw it now or you never saw this group of artists again. And obviously, I never saw this group of artists, but man, what a 2001 lineup that was. I need to know if any of you guys went to that, and if you did, what you remember from it, because I'm jealous. So I will leave you guys here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a fun one. Always a nice trip down memory lane, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you enjoyed it, I would also appreciate it if you share the episode or share the podcast with a friend. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I'll be back next week, so I will talk to you all then. Bye.